Hi, and welcome to Canberra City Uniting Church interviews. And we're here with Jessica and Jason, who come from Uniting Earth, which is an agency we refer to now and again in some of our material. And some of you maybe are aware of Uniting Earth, and others might be wondering, who is that? And so to start with, I'd just like to, welcome Jessica and Jason and thank them for their time. But also, if you would like to introduce yourselves and just give us a little bit of detail about what is Uniting Earth and how does it sit within the Uniting Church?
Hi, everyone. So my name's Jessica, and I'm one of our Uniting Earth advocates, along with Jason. And we're part of Uniting's advocacy team. So we work for Uniting, the social services arm of the church. But as part of the advocacy team, we work with the whole of the Uniting Church in New South Wales ACT to really speak up for the vulnerable in many different contexts, and in our context particularly God's creation and the vulnerable earth through our climate advocacy. So in July last year, our synod passed a resolution to take action on climate change and to support our the climate strikes by the School Strike for Climate Kids, and to advocate to government at all levels for climate action. So a large part of our role is working with that climate action strategy and the task groups that were formed out of that and supporting their work.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason. So yeah, as Jess said, we both work half-time for Uniting Earth, and recently we've been joined by a couple of our colleagues, John O'Brien and Dee Davidian, who use some of their time to help in the climate area as the church has, I guess, been getting more intentional about matching some of our very fine words over the last few decades with some substantial action. So yeah, we're very privileged to be able to do this as not only our passion, but actually our ministry and our professional work.
It's probably worth noting that as part of the church's commitment to the whole state of New South Wales and the Australian Capital Territory, you two are actually based quite differently. Jessica, you're in Sydney, is that correct? And I know, Jason, you're up in Bellingen.
Yeah, up here with all the mosquitoes tonight.
All the mosquitoes. And
I'm trying not to swat them.
Yeah, the fig tree behind you. So you've mentioned already about your involvement in following on from the Synod's resolution of last year. What are some of the other activities Uniting Earth has been involved with or initiated in recent times? And Jason, you maybe could start this one
Sure.
off.
So yeah, as part of the task group's work, Jessica in particular spearheaded getting together some worship resources for May the 10th, which themselves kind of built on the church's engagement with the online student, well, it wasn't really a rally, student event on May the 15th. And we also collaborated with the Australian Religious Response for Climate Change and Common Grace in that as well. And yeah, pretty much beyond that, like there's been a real shift in emphasis with the creation of these task groups in December to supporting the work of members in the church in the directions that they discern that we should be going, compared to, I guess, more in the past. It was up to us to decide the strategies and where we should be heading and ask people to join us. So we've kind of reversed the direction there.
So, Jessica, why is something like environment, climate change, why are these issues which the church and we as followers of Jesus should be involved in and interested in from the perspective of our faith and discipleship?
Yeah, so I see these as really core faith issues. We serve a God who we know as creator, and a God who has loved creation into being, who has been with creation all throughout its existence, within it and among it. And Jesus helped to redeem creation. So really the whole story of faith is also a story of God's love and care for creation. And so we have this huge call as Christians to be with God in caring for creation like that. And that's before you even start talking about the responsibility that we have to care for neighbor and to care for the vulnerable and to care for all of the people who are already being impacted by climate change, usually even though they've contributed nothing or very, very little to it, which is a huge justice issue. And that's another thing that we're really big on in our church. In fact, one of my favorite things about the Uniting Church, a large part of the reason I'm part of this church, is our long history of care for the environment. And that begins with our basis of union, our foundational document, which says that essentially the role of the church is to serve God's goal for the whole of creation, which is its reconciliation and renewal. So that is what the church should be doing, and that's what we're trying to help you do.
Anything you want to add, Jason?
Yeah, I think Jess nailed it. I think, I would add that, Jesus taught about money and wealth and the dangers of greed more than just about anything. And clearly this environmental crisis is inextricably linked with the financial crisis and the accumulation of wealth to the few. So in theory, even if you didn't actually care about any other creatures, as Jess said, just the need to care for our neighbour and provide the resources they need to live drives us to deal with the environmental challenges we have. But I guess for me personally, for me the story of the sciences tells us more and more that we are part of this family of life. That's the wisdom that our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters bring to us, and church leaders from the Pacific Islands, that we are a family of life. We're all connected. So it's not so much that we care for creation as if that was some other thing that we look after, but we're part of this family. We've been very naughty, some of us, and we need that prodigal moment to come to our senses and return to the family.
Thank you. Jessica, when we met in a different context of a Zoom meeting, and it seems to be our life at this moment in time as being in Zoom, but you had some specific thoughts about the direction that the church might like to celebrate World Environment Day, and this video itself will probably be going live on World Environment Day. And so I'll just be interested to know what you would like to see in terms of the church's celebrations on World Environment Day, and any resources that may be available for us in seeking to achieve that.
Yeah, so I'm developing some resources for this World Environment Day around the bushfires actually this year, because life has moved on for many of us since the crisis of the bushfires into this kind of focus on COVID. But for those affected by the fires, the impact continues. And many of them are lucky if they've even got to a kind of cleaning up phase. So it will be months and months, if not years and years, before, they can rebuild and they can try and recover from these extraordinary fire events that we have seen and that were exacerbated by climate change. And I think, no one in Australia, certainly no one in New South Wales, ACT, can say anymore that we haven't been affected by climate change. We have. This is not a 30, 50-year thing anymore. We have already been affected. People have died in the fires. We've just heard that over 400 people died from the smoke. About 80% of people were affected by that smoke. So we actually know now what it feels like to be affected by climate change. And let's not forget, there were the fires, and then they were immediately followed by floods and hail. Many parts of our state are still in severe drought. So, this is what we're expecting from climate change, that it won't even be one bad disaster. It will be disaster after disaster after disaster, and all of those roll into each other, making it really, really hard for our communities to be resilient and to deal with what's happening. So we need to, I think, as a church, take some time to actually think about what happened to us this year, to actually think about the impacts of that, and to think about the best way to love our communities and to help those people to not have to face this again in the very soon future, is to be taking some really serious action about climate right now.
Thank you. Obviously, the work of Uniting Earth and the work of caring for our environment is an ongoing concern to which we're called. And so, Jason, what would be some of your hopes for the church with regard to our expressing our vocation of caring for creation?
Yeah, look, one hope would be that we'd do it. And I guess that we'd flip from looking around and finding, a few dozen examples of churches that have really taken this message on board and see that our relationship with the rest of creation is core to their faith, to 10 years' time when there's only a dozen or so churches that haven't done that and that don't get it. I'd love to see the church increase its presence in demanding that our political leaders, many of whom are Christian, reorientate their faith in a way that, I guess Uniting Church people generally understand to be the priorities that we have ahead of us. This window is narrowly closing to the many humans who died in the fires. We could have those billions of creatures. We have less than 10 years to have reduced our emissions by at least 70%. In fact, now it's about 9 years. So the church really just needs to be at the forefront. I'm an introvert. Many people in the church are. I'm a nice person. Many people in the church are. We don't like disturbing people. We don't like getting people upset. But how much worse can it get before we demand real action from our leaders and not propping up the gas industry, for example?
And as I was saying before, I think we have such a strong faith basis for this, that being good Christians means that we should be really taking leadership in this area. The church should be the absolute first organisation leading everything to try and get real action for environment and for climate change. And I think also, people see this as another thing that we have to do and kind of add it to the list. But there's incredible opportunities here as well. I sometimes say that environmental ministry might be the greatest evangelism tool that you've never heard of. So many people in our community, especially at the moment with the shake-up of COVID, they're disappointed with the way that things are going. They're looking for better ways of living and better ways of organising our society that look after everyone, that make sure we actually are all in this together. And as we've seen, the health of any of us depends on the health of all. So we're looking at better ways, to live and to be society and to be community. And the church, if it's faithful to its environmental call and faith to its calls as community, is one of the best places for people to be able to learn and experiment with those ideas. So we actually have a lot to potentially offer at this moment. And so, we could be really relevant and exciting to people if we really focus on doing environmental ministry with integrity and tell people about it.
You've got us on a roll now, Paul. If I can throw in one quick thing, I know you want to keep this brief, but the church did lead the way. The church has led the way in the fossil fuel divestment movement, for example. We were, one of the first organisations to really take that seriously, and the line that was used a lot of the time was, if it's wrong to do something, it's wrong to profit from doing it. And I think that challenge is now before us with, the gas industry, but it's something that every member in the Uniting Church can do if they have superannuation is join the church's broader divestment movement by just switching your super away from anything that supports fossil fuels. 1 minute of Googling will find you a better fund, and just do it. And if we had 3/4 of the Uniting Church members switching their super, that's something that people would start to notice and that we could start to really share with the wider community.
Yeah. So look, just to finish with, and thank you for that. And I'm pleased I got you on the roll. There's a bit of energy there. It's good to hear the passion and the energy, and a message I think that certainly I strongly resonate with, and many of the folks at Canberra City Uniting Church do. And so what can we look forward to in the future from Uniting Earth? What's coming after World Environment Day for you and for us?
So one of the next big things that we've got coming up is our Uniting Earth Climate Conference 2020.
Yep.
So some of you might have heard about the climate pastoral care training that we did last year. And that was a really exciting bringing together of psychologists and experts around psychology and climate anxiety, climate grief, all of the mental health issues that climate change is creating for our people and for our communities, and ministers and church leaders and interested parties, so that we can learn how we can actually help people through this. You know, when we get couples coming to us who've just had babies, and this happened to a friend of mine, and they're kind of saying, you know, we just had a child, but we're looking at climate change and the world seems to be falling apart. And we're just getting really, really anxious and worried about this. You know, the idea of this training is to actually help you kind of know where to send them or what you can say yourself and how you can actually help them through that experience. So that's one aspect this year. So 3 aspects of our climate conference. There's the climate pastoral care training aspect. We're also really looking at climate communication. So how do we actually talk to people about climate change in a way that will get them on board and not scare them off? And how do we kind of talk across some of the divides in our community? And finally, church action, of course. You know, how do we actually take all of this and put it in action within our communities?
There's also a couple of things now. If people go to the website, we've put together a kind of campaign in a box. So for people, I guess, that believe this is an important issue but aren't quite sure what next step to take, or maybe need some help persuading other people around them that it's important, you can just download that really easily. There's some worship resources that we've designed to be easy to just pick up and use bits of while we're all experimenting in this new COVID-19 virtual world. And of course, the seasonal creation's not far away, so there'll be some kind of, again, more worship resources, but also resources to help people bring about real change. So, you know, worship, of course, is central to the church, but then so is the service of others, including all the other creatures, and calling, particularly at the moment, our political leaders to be servants of the people and of creation.
I think I noticed this day on Facebook that you've now announced new dates for your climate conference. So I assume that there's certainly a link for Uniting Earth generally, and maybe a link for the conference, and we'll include that in the description that will go with this video. Jessica and Jason, look, I thank you very much for your time today, and Jason, particularly your heroic efforts in enduring the fellowship of mosquitoes during this time. You're taking the time, and appreciate the ministry that you offer in both being advocates on this issue within and beyond the church, and a resource for the church, so that we can all share in this area of ministry and our vocation as followers of Jesus to care for creation. So thank you, and we wish you God's blessings in your ongoing ministry and life, and we'll finish up there. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, just before we do, Paul, thanks for giving us the opportunity, but also we just wanted to thank the Canberra churches. There's just an incredible amount of good news stories coming out of the churches in Canberra and the ACT around engagement with caring for and building a better relationship with the rest of creation. So there's some definite leading lights floating there around you, including yourself, of course.
Thank you. Okay, thanks a lot.